Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Food Sovereignty and Economic Development, Growing Self-Sufficiency in Our Native Communities. So a few preparatory remarks before we begin today's presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for later viewing at our website, www.anaeastern.org. You can expect it to be published there in about 2 weeks' time. Further, we have converted today's PowerPoint into a PDF, which you can download and use for taking notes if you wish to do so. That PDF can be found under the Handouts section of your control panel, which can be expanded simply by clicking the orange arrow at the top of the Grab tab. This PDF will also be posted to our website and will be found on our resources page. So I'm the facilitator for today's presentation. My name is Marissa Carmi, and I am the Outreach and Technology Specialist for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, where I've been working for about the past 4 years. I am from the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, and as an aside, I have a particular passion for this topic. As someone who is trying to achieve food sovereignty in my own small way, I recently purchased a 30-acre parcel, and we just broke ground for the first time last weekend, planting a variety of blueberries. So I'm desperately hoping that they turn out like the picture on your screen. So let's go over what we're doing in today's presentation. I'll begin by providing a brief overview of food sovereignty and how it relates to the mission and work of the Administration for Native Americans. Then we are very fortunate to have 2 grantees taking time out of their very busy schedules. They'll be sharing with us what individual methods they are using to realize food sovereignty in their respective communities. And lastly, we'll have a question and answer session in which you are free to ask about any points that come up today or to request a little more information from our grantees. So let's begin by defining food sovereignty. The definition on your screen came out of the first global forum on food sovereignty held in 2007, and it seems to be pretty widely accepted world over. In doing research on this topic, I found this definition posted front and center on the websites of many organizations working on food sovereignty, to include the website of one of our presenters today. At the crux of food sovereignty is the belief that communities have the right to determine what foods they will consume and where those foods come from. We can see how this independence and self-direction aligns directly with ANA's mission, which is to support Native communities in achieving self-sufficiency. So to that end, ANA has funded a number of projects over the years that either focus on or incorporate strategies towards achieving food sovereignty. What I want to emphasize in this moment is that working on food sovereignty does not always have to mean starting or expanding a farm. I myself sometimes think of this as being the sole or quintessential path towards achieving food sovereignty. But truthfully, attaining food sovereignty relies on both large and small-scale strategies, and ANA funding can cover both. Grantees have in fact started and developed large farms, the produce of which they sell at local markets, and they've established thriving businesses through the harvesting and selling of locally available produce like maple syrup. But if the resources and infrastructure are not yet in place, they've also come up with creative, small-scale, but still vitally important means for working towards food sovereignty. I had the privilege of traveling to Hawaii last week to meet with our regional training and technical assistance counterparts based there, and I got to meet some of the grantees that are located in Hawaii. While the project scope of one of those grantees is not exclusively food sovereignty, it is part of their effort, which is to restore the Hawaiian tradition of voyaging of a generation. This grantee explained that most voyaging crews today are forced to travel with overly processed foodstuffs, meals and snacks packed with preservatives and stored in BPA-lined cans. In response to this, project staff are now studying the art of preserving and canning and passing this knowledge on to Hawaiian youth who are learning to make and package jams and jellies, pickled vegetables, and preserved meat. This project does not have its own farm, but is partnering with local farms to source the food they are using. I think this case provides a good illustration of how food sovereignty strategies can vary and how you can really tailor the focus of your project to the needs and capacity of your community. Of course, it is a bit easier to discern how large-scale projects can result in economic development, the latter being the focus of our presentation today. So let's go ahead and hear about the experiences of our entrepreneurial grantees who are in the business of food sovereignty. Kicking things off today is Suzanne Nash, First Medicine's Program Manager at the Indigenous Peoples Task Force in Minnesota. She is here to present information on their Digi Baby project, which aims to improve maternal and child nutrition of Native families located in Minneapolis. Suzanne Ojibwe has worked in tobacco control for 14 years and is a LAMP alumna and in her second year as policy champion. Suzanne has facilitated and coordinated tobacco cessation, education, and policy work with 11 tribes in Minnesota and the urban area. She has worked at Indigenous Peoples Task Force for close to 16 years as a tobacco program manager, housing director, medical case management supervisor, and as a youth coordinator for the Webinge curriculum, the focus of which is tobacco prevention, cessation, and alcohol and drugs. For the past 10 years, Suzanne has organized and facilitated statewide conferences around tobacco, cultural teachings, traditional foods, environmental issues, and policy work. At the statewide conference, the Return to First Medicines Gatherings, which is an event for adults and youth to learn about sacred medicines, growing traditional foods, and how to care for our environment, Suzanne organized and facilitated the Seeds Network Council in planning and budgeting. So clearly she is very busy, and so we are very thankful for her presence here with us today. Suzanne, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Bonjour, hello all. Okay, so I'll begin to start to talk about our Digi Baby project, which we're really excited about. And Digi Baby right now is the pilot game that we need for now. It's a new adventure for us, and we are going to have the youth and the interns that are on this project with us that are learning. They're going to come up with a logo, a name, and design for the project. So for right now, it's called Digi Baby. And that's to work on maternal health and child nutrition and diabetes. So we have a 2-year planning grant for this project with ANA, and we're really excited about it. Next. So as you see here, there's a picture of a baby in a cradle board. You know, a long time ago, that's how babies were carried. And when the women worked in whatever capacity it was, the babies were always with them. And at this stage, when they're in the cradle board, this is where they learn their senses, how to smell, how to sit still, how to look around, and how to be still. And I think we've lost that through the years of teaching our babies how to sit still and focus on what's around them without having to be introduced to all these extra things that they've never been introduced to before. So one of the goals the goal of the program is to reduce the rates of obesity among Native children and obesity-linked diseases that disproportionately affect Native Americans living in Minneapolis. And since Native Americans have such high rates of diabetes, we felt like this was important to work and figure out how do we start this. And one of the reasons we started Digi Baby was because it starts with the babies first. If they're not introduced to sugar, then they may not carry that addiction, and we can stop and reduce the diabetes. Next. So the project has 3 primary objectives, which include: one is to increase the knowledge and skills in traditional Native foods and nutrition, production and harvest and processing. And the other part is to do the design and test the produce baby foods made of traditional Native foods. And the other one is conceptualize Digi Baby foods and the business model. Next. The expected outcomes. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but I'm just going to start off with the top. We anticipate outcomes and benefits for individuals, participants, and their families. And then to create that again with their families and so on. And you can see there's there's 4 bullet points here that talked about exactly what the outcomes would be. Next. So this is the teaching garden, the curriculum. So in Ojibwe, this means the teaching garden. So what this curriculum is designed to teach about our worldwide views as Anishinaabe through our seasons, our cultural practices, as well as our cultural and traditional gardening knowledge. And I cannot say this in Ojibwe as I've been learning too, but still haven't got there. So it's the teaching garden Gitagan. So this curriculum sessions are as follows, and we've added a couple sessions to here. I see that we don't have in this slide, but it's really broken down to our relationship to tobacco, because for Ojibwe people, everything we start off with is tobacco first. So we teach them about a tobacco ceremony, what your relationship to tobacco is, and then we focus on the prenatal health, the maternal health and nutrition, our relationship to Mother Earth and our relationship to the world. And that has to do with the water and how we take care of the earth. And then there's relationship to food through our cultural foods. And then there's session 6 is the family garden pot session. So each youth or each young adult creates their own pot, and they get something to care for to take home with them during this time. And then there's the garden songs and activities. So for each time that we plant, there are certain songs that we sing for different times of the seasons. And then we always have a ceremony in the beginning and at the end where we celebrate with food with the community. And then we also do different cultural teachings through their skirt making. We did cradle boards. We made cradle boards with the youth, and medicine pouches for the tobacco. Next. And here is some of the young interns that are learning how to make composting soil. So they're learning how to measure it and get the ingredients together. Next. And this is one of the interns, Lupe, Titus, and Esther. They're out in the field, and she's obviously tasting some food. So they actually work the farm. So they're getting hands-on training, and they work the farm all summer. Next. And here we're harvesting some of our food, and this is at a smaller garden that we have here, and we did like the 3 sisters, and we have tobacco plants also in here. And so this is a couple of our staff who are beginning to do some of the harvesting. Next. And here is our processing the squash. So this year, through the planning process, we picked 2 ingredients for our Digi baby food. And we are going to do squash and wild rice and blueberries. And that's our test pilot right now. So in this session, they're learning how to process the squash. Next. And then this picture, we're learning about the business planning. So we had about 10 people here. We had 5 adults and some youth. And they're learning how to do the business plan for this project. Next. And here are some of the samples of our baby food that we just did recently. We used the squash and the blueberries and wild rice. And as you can see, there's one with just wild rice. So this was a process of we turned the wild rice into a flour base, and then we cooked it up, and these are our samples that we had. And the next stage with this is we are sending this out to North Dakota State, who we're working with them they'll give us the value in the ingredients for the label for our baby food. Next. And that's it for mine, miigwech. And if you have any questions, let me know.
All right, thank you so much for sharing with us, Suzanne. If anyone has any questions for Suzanne, she will be here again at the end of the presentation for the Q&A period. I'll now introduce our second grantee here from Tulane Enterprise in Arizona, our Executive Director, Stephanie Hall, and Youth Program Manager, Brell Jones. A little background information about them both before they begin. Stephanie is committed to strengthening local communities by building and executing administrative and managerial strategies, project development and implementation, and community organizing. She is an experienced grant administrator and project director. Brell leads TLE's Youth Leadership Program and is currently enrolled in a master's level public administration program at Northern Arizona University. He is experienced in working on youth leadership projects and plans on continuing to use his skills and knowledge to involve and strengthen local Navajo, Hopi, and other Indigenous youth. So Stephanie and Brell, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, it's a thank you. We are glad to be here, so thank you for having us. Just to give some background, Tulane Lake Enterprises is nestled in the southwest corner of the Navajo Nation. Our neighbors include the Hopi Nation and our border communities of Winslow and Flagstaff, Arizona, and we are situated in a high desert arid region where our average rainfall is 7 inches per year. We get our water resources from the Little Colorado River and the tributaries that make up the LCR watershed. Next. But before we begin, we want to give you all a clearer picture of the socioeconomic dynamics of the conditions in our local communities. This will shed some light on our approach to addressing food sovereignty and the larger issue of economic security in our communities. So here are some statistics I'd like to share. And I know Navajo is not unique with these types of statistics, but I wanted to quickly point out some of the stories behind these numbers because there are people and land and environment behind these numbers. So if you look at that, 18,000 Navajo homes are without electricity. Here in our communities, we have quite a few families that still place their meat, milk, and other perishables in wired boxes outside their winter. In the summer, these perishables are stored in portable ice chests, and there's often not enough room to consider storing perishable produce. Another statistics is the one regarding diabetes. Diabetes is rampant in our communities, but if you consider the problem or the lack of access to ways to cool down or to preserve perishable items, if you don't have a place to store them and the 100-mile round trip to town with limited budget to get food, you're probably less likely to get more than a couple days worth of fresh produce if you get any at all. So a lot of our people rely primarily on canned foods, canned fruits and veggies, and other types of produce or foods with long shelf life. And these have high preservatives, including salts, that lead to food-related health problems, including diabetes. Next. Here's a couple other numbers. We have a lot of family ranches and farms on Navajo Nation. However, due to climate change and overgrazing, a lot of our traditional growing areas are threatened by or have already been taken over by things like sand dunes and areas where there are huge patches of places where there's just no growth. We've lost our soil. Our service area also includes 20,000 acres of the former Bennett Freeze area. The Bennett Freeze was put in place in 1966 over 1.5 million acres of land. This basically locked out residents for 45 years of being able to do any kind of development or construction on their property. So it really developed a condition of extreme poverty in those areas. Next. So Tulane Lake Enterprises, with its current mission, arose initially as a grassroots movement in 2012 to address some of these economic disparities. Next. We took a holistic approach when developing our mission back in 2012. Initially, we worked on water projects, water sovereignty projects, but now our current work is primarily with food sovereignty and food literacy. Next. So we're working on 2 food initiatives simultaneously. The first one is to bring an animal harvest facility to our region, and that would help, sheep producers and cattle producers to have access to the facility so that they could market their meat products. But the ANA project that we have is primarily focused on the fresh fruits and produce to develop that type of growing environment in our region. And we have localized that project primarily on our 3-acre demonstration site at TLE. Next. So I'm going to discuss our project. As stated earlier, our communities lack access to nutritious foods. We are deeply deprived of nutrients. Our people consistently and adamantly appeal to our local governments to address this issue, but our governments have mostly prioritized bringing water and electricity to our most vulnerable, which is important, but it doesn't address our need for nutritious foods. So that's where our project, the Neh Small Farm and Ranch Project, becomes so important. This is a 3-year project with multiple partnerships, including ones with the Neh College Land Grant Office, Ashoka Gardens, our local farms, and our new and experienced growers. Next. We have taken a 2-tiered approach to training and building the capacity of our people to grow, prepare, and market fresh produce. The first tier is our Train the Trainer program. We have 6 trainers and 1 ad hoc trainer who steps in when needed, who are participating in a 16-week weekly day-long training at Ashoka Gardens located in Snowflake, Arizona. They are getting hands-on training from some of our region's premier growers. During this current training, they are learning season extender techniques and the business aspects of market production. Our trained trainers are made up of a range of experienced growers and leaders throughout Navajo and Hopi nations. These are leaders who are already committed to building up their communities and have also committed to emphasizing growing initiatives in their own communities. They are charged with attending and training, developing a curriculum that also integrates a cultural component, and then turning around and teaching the curriculum to TLE's farmer workshop attendees. These trained trainers have also committed to teaching this curriculum in their home communities located from Western to Central Navajo Nation. The curriculum will eventually be available for free in our communities to replicate, and will include a lesson plan, a list of materials and supplies, amount of time committed to the workshop, and best practices. Next. Our TLE 16-week farmer workshop series is free and open to growers throughout our region. They are held at our demonstration site as well as at Star School, a partner location. Our attendees include new and experienced growers. Some of our most dedicated attendees come from Beaver Farm, which is a 100-acre farm located in Loop, Arizona. Our attendees range from having a small backyard garden bed to having multi-acre farmland. They come to access water, how to improve soil, and I think to bond with other growers. While we serve subsistence and market farmers, we emphasize the possibilities of market farming and how to set up record-keeping, food safety plans, and business management plans. At each of these 16 workshops, we've also included a food literacy component taught by a local food literacy and food justice advocate who has worked alongside Indigenous food pioneers such as the Sioux Chef. So we're very lucky to have him. Next. In these pictures are some of the dishes served at our workshops prepared by our local literacy experts. I'm beginning to think that the reason we get such a good turnout is because of the great lunches we are serving. Some of the discussions we've had include how to reduce wheat by adding other types of grains, such as blue corn, to something like pizza dough. These particular pizzas were cooked in our on-site adobe ovens. Other discussion includes initiatives like how to decolonize food. At each of these meals, attendees are presented with fresh salads made with fresh greens harvested from Ashoka gardens and drizzled with homemade dressings. In that last picture, I just want to point out that I have never, ever seen mutton ribs and bread take a back seat to the rest of the meal, including a salad, especially a salad. Next. Our project also includes incorporating and providing technical assistance and resources to our local growers. These sort of things include having a do-it-yourself walk-in cooler workshop. As I stated earlier, a lot of people have difficulties trying to cool their food and to store preserved food. So what we want to try to do is provide innovative ways for people to be able to store meats and as well as fresh produce for long periods of time. Other services include tractor services, access to simplified tools and templates, especially when it comes to record keeping and business management. And we eventually want to start up, or at least help enhance local farmers markets so that people who want to sell their produce at the local farmers market have the ability to do so. Now I'll turn it over to Burrell to talk about the next couple of items.
Ja, det är bra Jones da shidne. Nakrene nashlen qatani bashshin hashkan hadda das chedo tachini dashnale. Nalaya dahilende nasha. Hello. My name is Burrell Jones. I come from the Grand Falls region and Loop community, and I am the youth program manager for the TLE, the NAS Small Ranch Development Project, and I'll be talking about the market garden. So we want to access with this produce some local flea markets we have in the area, and where we're situated at, as Stephanie mentioned, is 3 communities: Loop, Talani Lake, and Bird Springs. All combined account to at least 3,000 residents, Navajo families in the area. And we want to find a way to sell our produce once we grow it and during the harvest time this year and next year. Also, we are looking into border towns or nearby towns that are interested in purchasing some of the produce we are growing. One of the business managers at Captain Tony's Pizza Restaurant in Winslow, Arizona, is very interested and inclined to purchasing local grown foods on Navajo, and we want to find a good partnership and foster this partnership over time to begin accessing this market. At the same time, build our brand and reputation within our community and in these border town areas that also have a large market in themselves. Another thing to add to that is Flagstaff Farmers Market. That has been a growing area for a lot of local producers, and we want to also establish ourselves to access those markets as well. And with the Youth Leadership Program, we've looked at school site visits. We are also interested in community food giveaways. We're also looking at after-school programs as well as summer youth programs. And all of this helps the youth generate ideas innovatively around growing produce they're interested in, and also to incorporate the traditional cultural values about growing our own foods as a food sovereignty movement. A lot of youth now don't understand the spiritual aspects, the Diné philosophy of connecting with what we've grown in the past. And so a lot of this youth leadership program allows us to develop and foster these cultural aspects for them to understand and for them to embody this knowledge and carry on later on in their lives. And we also want to invite the community members, the families, to come and engage these hands-on activities of learning how to grow their own produce. So a lot of this work we're developing is dedicated to create a sustainable model for the youth to carry on in the future, because they are our future leaders. And also I want to add that social media is a very integrated component for youth to come together as a community and support one another. So with this youth program, we're looking at recruiting, announcing, and promoting our demonstration garden as well as a community garden for the youth, so that we can connect with one another with online presence and to really dedicate ourselves to our communities and these isolated and desolated communities on Navajo. Next.
So with this project and with many of our projects, what we are trying to create a model that others can also learn, refine, replicate in their communities, and share with others. We're doing this using the Diné planning paradigm. Our cultural advisor and a Diné medicine man member helped us develop this way of organizing our lives and our projects. Through this paradigm, we are in constant motion to improve ourselves, our projects, and hopefully our communities. Next. And through these types of projects, we are hoping that we are laying foundations and laying the groundwork for 50 years from now and having a strong economic security, food sovereignty, and water sovereignty as well. So this project is very, very beneficial to our communities, and we're grateful to be a part of it. Next. So thank you. Yeah.
And thank you so much to you both. I'll just direct you all very quickly to some resources that may be useful or of interest to you if you'd like to pursue this topic a little bit further. NativeFoodAlliance.org is a really great website for finding information on food sovereignty as it pertains specifically to Native America. You can find information on open funding opportunities there, as well as a calendar of food sovereignty events being held around the country this year. Additionally, located on the website for First Nations Development Institute is the Food Sovereignty Assessments Report. From 2016 through 2017, First Nations awarded 39 grants to different Native communities so they could conduct food sovereignty assessments and determine what assets they had in place to develop and or strengthen their local food systems. The information in this report summarizes the findings of those assessments. And this is a great resource for those of you who would like to know more about the planning process for food sovereignty projects. It's also very valuable in that it offers guidance in how to best conduct a community assessment, which is a necessary component of ANA grant proposals. An important note, you do need to have an account with First Nations website to access this report, but the registration process is very easy and it is free. They simply enforce this step because this report and other manuals posted on their site were published through grants that require them to collect basic information for reporting purposes. So with that, we'll head into our Q&A. I have Candy on standby who will be fielding questions.
We do have one comment that was received from James Nez. and he commented with regard to Stephanie's presentation that he agrees that the overgrazing issue on Navajo affects plant growth and the runoff of water. Water runoff happens fast, and we often do not catch that resource. We need to make better use of runoff water in relation to farming here. We have Laguna Creek running year-round, and we do not use it. I didn't know if you had anything to add to that, Stephanie?
Yeah, so water is a critical issue, especially in our little part of the world. As I stated earlier, we only get like 7 inches of rainfall a year, if that. This year was a very detrimental year. We didn't get the snowfall that we needed that is critical to providing water into our local water systems. So Hawaiian Lake Enterprises from 2012 to 2015 really focused hard on the water part of the water issues in our area, and through our work we helped develop what's called the Little Colorado River Watershed Chapter Association, which is made up of 25 Navajo communities along the Puerco and Little Colorado rivers, and they're led by local community leaders. And what they are doing is working with their local planning committees to address some of these very, very critical issues. And the runoff through overgrazing and climate change is very, very detrimental to growing in our areas. And we've tried to address it through things like slowing down the water, through building up like little earthen dams that don't stop the water. They slow it down so it has time to seep back into our local aquifers. So yeah, it is a very critical issue, and it's something that should be addressed when addressing food sovereignty as well in our area.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. We have another comment. Thank you for the presentations, and with a question from Foley Faltzgraff. In either program, what are some of the evaluation tools used to understand the effectiveness of the food sovereignty programs? So Stephanie, will ask you what type of evaluation you're doing, and then we'll ask Suzanne.
Sure. So we're doing 2 types of evaluations. The first is we did a blind survey to our local communities to identify who's growing and what farms are out there, what growing areas are out there. And as we're working with our local planning committees and land use committees to try to identify as many potential sites and historically traditional growing sites as well. And we're going to use this baseline to kind of reevaluate, use the same survey to reevaluate every year to see what the impact of our work and the work of our communities are over the next several years. Another type of survey that we're doing and information that we're collecting is just at our workshops. Who is attending our workshops? So we're finding that when we first started, it was primarily our youth that were attending. They were very interested. But as we progressed, we noticed that we're starting to get more experienced growers coming in, and growers who are our elders now and who are kind of helping us learn a little bit more about the history of our farming communities. Those are the 2 types of surveys that we've used to evaluate the work that we're doing.
Suzanne, how are you doing evaluation?
So in the beginning, we do an intake process when the young adults start with us. In the beginning, they do an intake to see what they know about the food and questionnaire. But we also do a pre and post test. So some of the changes we've seen is their eating habits. We've seen a big change since they started with us. and their cultural food knowledge. So like again, it's the pre and post test and then the intake process. And then at the end, you know, we kind of go over that intake process with them and have them do another one and select and see if it's any different from the beginning to the end.
Okay, thank you. A question for Suzanne. What are your, I know you're working on your business plan development, but what is your intent with the IndigiBaby project for marketing it?
Well, the intention of it is to create some sustainability, and developing the business plan will help us with that, and to use our cultural foods. And the business plan was really to do the entrepreneurial training with them, to train the young adults in how to do a business plan. And that was the idea, was that they would know how to do this, use that for the future. Also with the hands-on farming, the soil, compost, all that training that they get is hands-on. And then we're also doing some stuff with them around earth block. Creating a storage shed again, so that will be on the job training that they will get, that they will be able to take away from here when they're done. So the idea is that when they leave us, they will be able to grow their own food. But the marketing of the DigiBaby, the design behind that, the graphics design, the kids will be trained, or the young adults will be trained in on that, on how to create that graphic design. And we want to market it and get it out into the stores and with the WIC programs, so that babies have access to traditional cultural foods.
Thank you, Suzanne. We have one other question, and this one would go to Stephanie. It's from Tim Rosette, and he asked, how was the high tunnel infrastructure built, and how can others look at that as a source to produce our own vegetables? So I believe that was your project, Stephanie?
Yes, thank you for the question. The high tunnel, or the hoop house, was actually donated to TLE, but TLE is working on a toolkit in which people can access funds through the USDA NRCS program to build hoop houses very similar to that. So USDA NRCS does provide funding. You have to develop a conservation plan, and depending on what tribe you're with or what group you're with, there's probably some other elements that you have to go through as well to get that type of plan to move forward and approve through whatever entity that it needs to get approved through. But that particular hoop house was donated, and it was used. The framing is like that fencing steel framing that's been curved, and the shell is to be it's a specific material that prevents, you know, the sun from destroying that shell part. But I'm not entirely 100% up to date with the hoop house, but I can definitely share information as if emailed.
Right, and your contact information is on the slides. We have another question. With A&A, I find the economic development component to sometimes be challenging. Sometimes people in a community food project are more motivated by culture and community than economics. Can either of you say more about how strong that component needs to be, or alternative ways to address it where entrepreneurship is not a strong focus? So I think both of you haven't really quite got to the to the marketing of the marketing of your products yet. But can either of you answer the question, Stephanie or Suzanne?
This is Suzanne. You're right. Like, we haven't gotten to the full market part of it yet, but we are in the process, and yeah, I guess I'm not sure how to really answer that one. I lost what I was going to say. Sorry. I know that our goal and the idea is to train these youth these young adults to have some leadership abilities and be able to grow food in their communities or in their homes, in their backyards, and really to change their idea around what food sovereignty is, and to also put their hands back in the soil. Because I think once they do that and them cultural pieces are set, everything else kind of begins to fall in place. And the entrepreneur part will come when we can get the baby food marketed and out there.
We've identified a couple different markets for our produce. As Burrell mentioned in our presentation, we have a potential market with Captain Tony's Pizzeria. And what we're doing is utilizing our hoop house specifically for that market opportunity. So what Captain Tony, or the owner of Captain Tony's, is requesting is actually a wide range of different produce, but we're going to be focusing on red and green peppers, as well as spinach and onions. So our hoop house is going to be dedicated primarily to that particular market. And using our food safety program, we're going to be able to sell to Captain Tony's from our market. And that's going to be our demonstration part of it. As our learning side, our demonstration side is, that's not our number one goal. It's just a part of the bigger picture. So through that market garden, we want to demonstrate that it is possible to utilize a small space to generate revenue. Another aspect development strategy is we have a fiscal sponsorship program. So through this fiscal sponsorship program, we're able to identify committees or groups of people who want to pursue farming initiatives. For instance, the people at Beaver Farm want to get their farm up and going. So through us, they can develop a committee, an ad hoc committee, or an organization that utilizes TLE to obtain funding for infrastructure and to develop its business plan, all the technical assistance it needs to get up and going. We have one initiative in another community that's outside of our primary communities called Cameron, who is already at the stage of requesting funding from Navajo Nation. So through our fiscal sponsorship program, that's how we're kind of addressing the economic development parts of it, the broader economic development question.
Well, thank you, all of you, for being on this webinar today and answering the questions. Marissa, I'm going to turn it back to you. That's the last of the questions that we have.
Sure. I do have my own question, actually, so just a real quick one for Burrell. You mentioned that social media has been an important tool for connecting with youth and generating interest among youth. I'm interested in what platform you're using and how you're using it. Just as a preface, ANA staff, along with the Regional Training and Technical Assistance Center staff, we've had this ongoing discussion of how to help and guide applicants in the use of social media in their projects, how it might be a tool. And it's something we're still working on. And so if you find that if you're having success with social media, I think we'd all be really interested in knowing how you're using it.
Hi, Marissa. Sure. So the idea generated from a couple online, I guess, YouTube platforms where it was mentioned that to get the generation of now, of this current generation, technology is very well incorporated with all the youth that are using it today, even in indigenous communities. A lot of them know how to use cell phones easily. And so with that in mind, I thought maybe using Facebook and Instagram, the top 2 platforms we are using now, to kind of send word and information out, just using simple hashtags, simple workshops that happen weekly that Stephanie mentioned. Our weekly Wednesday train-the-trainer workshops of growing, we would capture some events happening, and then we would send them out on Instagram and Facebook, posting up, helpful tips on growing, what you think as a grower would be beneficial. And we also are starting up a youth program blog. So the youth that are there now write in a daily journal, and these journals entries are posted on Facebook as a daily or a weekly. For now, it's a weekly blog saying like, okay, this is what I learned. How can this help other, farmers, people that just want to learn, interested growers, things like that, and small details, just to get that word out and just to say that there are interests in these areas, and maybe sometime in the future we connect with other youth in other Navajo communities and indigenous communities to kind of grow that food sovereignty movement with technology. So I hope I answered your question on the platform and how we're kind of, moving forward with this project.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. I love that idea of the daily journal that's posted to the feed. I think that's great. So as I said, that's something maybe we can incorporate some of your strategies to our help with applicants and grantees and their use of social media. So one final announcement before we sign off. If nutrition, food sovereignty, and diet are topics that interest you, the Western Region Training and Technical Assistance Center will be hosting a webinar in May on the relationship between diet and mental health. They too will be presenting with current grantees, so you can again catch a glimpse of the work that our Native communities are undertaking with ANA funds. You can look out for updates about that webinar on our website, as well as Western Region's website and the websites of our fellow regional centers listed here. And we always like to end these webinars stating that you are welcome to reach out to your regional center at any time, especially right now, as ANA's grant competition for all program areas is open, including the Social and Economic Development, or SEDS program area, under which you can apply for funds to support your food sovereignty project. The due date for all ANA applications is approaching, and that is April 9th, 2018. Again, a very heartfelt thanks to our presenters today. We really, really appreciate your being here with us. I hope that the material they and I have covered has planted a little seed of inspiration among those of you interested in achieving food sovereignty in your communities, and that you found this webinar informative and helpful. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.